Zubair, Bhatti, thank you so much for joining us and sparing time to talk to us. You did something very inspiring when you were in Jung. I don't know if you were deputy commissioner or assistant commissioner there, but relating to land records of the people, which becomes a big source of you know illegal earning for people in the government and the revenue department. So you did something to counter that. So could you please share the story with us, telling us from the beginning what happened, what struck you to take any action? How did you go forward from there?
Well, thank you, Professor, and thank you, Manu, for this opportunity. It has it was a long, long time ago, so it's more history than anything.
Well, no, this is for other people. It is important to learn because people don't see any space for bringing about changes. They are all looking up to the highest powers. They don't think we can do anything where we are. So that way
Well,
it
I
is.
guess that's, yeah, I guess your point is very valid. You know, we can all do a lot. Maybe we can't change the system, but then we are the system, you know,
Yes.
and if we try to push our boundaries, you know, the net effect is huge. Um Obviously every case is different, every individual is different, and you know, and I want to preface with my story or whatever I will share with the main point that I know a lot of colleagues, if not all, quite a few colleagues who in Pakistan, you know, I'm basically talking Pakistan, who work very hard, very diligently in very difficult circumstances and do a lot of good things. So it's not an unusual story. Um, but you know, the challenge also is in not so much in like I did a good or interesting thing. Uh, the challenge also is how do we go from there to scale up or institutionalize or you know, and that's a very difficult challenge. You know, in all governance, public sector, all reforms, doing a good thing is still different from doing an interesting thing, and then taking it up and scaling it up is a very different kind of a challenge. So let me go back. I was a I was a district coordination officer in District Jung back in I think 2008 there. So just to give a background, the district coordination officer in the Pakistani civil service and public administration system. In those days, it's something similar to deputy commissioner, but also slightly different as well. I was the kind of supervisory officer for pretty much every government functionary in the district. So this is, we're talking a pretty big structure. You know, the population of district was 3.3 million people at that time. There were, let's say, about 23,000 people, you know, reporting to me, mostly in the education, health sector, but, you know, revenue department and all the others as well. So pretty large structure. Now, you know, people complain about corruption all the time, right?
Yeah.
Petty corruption, you know, petty corruption all the time. We complain about it in our households. We come back home, we tell this story to everyone, what happened with police today or whatever, or you know, everybody complains about it. The reality is that when I am sitting as a district coordination officer supervising all of that, I have very little formal evidence or knowledge in an actionable way of what's going on. I mean, if
Right.
somebody comes and says that this guy is corrupt, that's interesting information, but I can't really do anything about it unless I have some, you know, even if says is corrupt, is able to give me some testimony on record that I paid him this, you know, much or what does that mean, and you know, and if some evidence, right? You can't just, you can't just, you can't just
Take action.
said, on a complaint, yes, but
Right.
complaint with evidence,
Yeah.
not just on any complaint. And I tell you, in government in Pakistan, my experience was, and I'm sure it's true even today, that people who were honest got more complaints against them than people who were corrupt. Because people who are corrupt in a smart way, they do corruption in a smart way. They just charge enough, like that classic argument of taxation. You just fleece enough that the other person doesn't get too unhappy.
Right.
uh, and then they share the money around,
Right.
and therefore and the honest people, because they're disruptive in that process, in that cycle, actually a lot many more people, even their colleagues, will file complaints against them, anonymous complaints and all of that, and
Right.
harass them and make their life difficult. So while we have these, complaints have been there forever in every system. um, you can't really do much. You can't really do much with that. Once in a while, you get a complaint, which is much more serious. So what happens is usually a complaint. Let's say there was a revenue official or somebody, or who charged, let's say, extra $5 from some extortionary on some minor matter. You get very angry, you go home, Fayaz, you, me, or Manu, we go home and we get angry. But then we're like, oh, it was just $5. Okay, fine, I mean, I would not want to, spend next 5 days or 1 month following up in Thana Kacheri, and wasting $500 of my time and energy when the only payment I made was $5. So, people
Right.
don't really complain because it's very expensive to follow up. Once in a while, somebody complains. Once in a while, expensive not in a sense that people are scared of that person, right? Not in that
Yeah.
sense, because we're not talking of millions of dollars here. We're not talking $1 billion illegal Swiss account, or, Bofors scandal or submarine. This is $5, $3, petty extortion
Yeah.
here, petty corruption. And this is not there's no big risk of punitive action. People, every time we talk about the Western context or whatever, even Eastern, oh, what do you do about, people getting, punitive action? No, these are minor amounts. We are not, there's
Yeah.
no big anonymity issue. These are my $1, $2 type, issues. And all the stuff I'm going to talk about today is all about this petty corruption, which are very small amounts, but they happen a lot across the
Right.
country.
Right.
And then there's another kind of corruption which is much larger sums, but it just, the number of instances are much smaller. That's the ways
Right.
to deal with those things are very different, right? These kind of
Right.
what I'm going to talk
Right.
about doesn't address those. And frankly,
Yeah.
even in Western countries, those things exist because those are very
Right.
difficult to sort of see and detect and deal with. Petty corruption is where we complain about, where we get most of our state interaction, where the ordinary person interacts. The rest is just
Yes.
stories, from a higher level. So even in the Western countries, this petty corruption is the one which goes first. The higher level corruption, that's a complicated issue, and and it's a different. So all I'm talking about today is petty corruption.
Yeah. Petty corruption, because administrative cost of catching that corruption is much higher than just
Exactly.
letting it continue. So that happens in the
Exactly.
West
And
also. Yeah.
the state's day-to-day impression is those petty corruption, right? Day-to-day impression
Right.
of the state is that petty corruption. The interaction with
Yeah.
the policeman, the interaction with the revenue officer, the interaction with the teacher. This is state for the ordinary people,
Exactly.
right? This is not,
Right.
Ministry of Finance is not the state for the ordinary people.
Right.
So anyway, so I would sit there, one of a big part of my job as a district collector or whatever, and this is ordinary, is that people would come and, file different, complaints of different kind, of all kinds, not about corruption, about different issues. I want a road, or, we want a school in our area or whatever. So, and then sometimes this will be about corruption, petty corruption. This guy, did something silly to me. So
Right.
I would do what an ordinary, civil servant would do. And you have to do it, that you give notice to the other party to come, to come explain your point of view. You can't take action just on
Yeah.
the basic rule of
One
justice.
party's, yeah,
You have to have
views.
hear the other party. You can't,
Right.
just because one person has complained. And even if you hear the other party, there has to be some evidence or some sense of evidence. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be evidence beyond reasonable doubt in a criminal sense, but in administrative action, in a civil space, at least there should be a balance of probability that something wrong has happened before I take any
Right.
action.
Right.
So I sent a notice to this person. What usually happens in Pakistan, and this is true in many countries, that this person who has been accused, of some wrongdoing, either will ignore it or whatever, or will go talk to that person and say, hey, I'll return you $1, and or wo local, they'll ask some local
Yeah.
vadera or elder to come interfere or whatever. And the next time, this person comes and says, yeah, I was under misunderstanding, something, I withdraw my complaint because
Okay. Yeah.
he has
Right.
been he's been taken care of privately. Or if he wants to follow up once or twice, he gets tired because it's, coming to my office waiting for me, the whole court process is complicated.
Yeah.
Just
Right.
because he paid $10 or whatever, I
Yeah.
mean, I may be very interested in him or her, but there are tens of those, dozens of those, and there's a process and all of that.
Yeah.
And coming from the village to come to my office, 50 kilometers and processing that, I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
basically the accused person waits it out. But even if he says this person becomes very serious, they'll kind of compromise off my system, and I really don't have any evidence to take any action against anyone, right?
Right.
No action. Anyway, one time I was sitting there, and this is a lot of the detail is in that Princeton case study. I mean, one civil servant who was actually a civil servant in Lahore, and just because he was a civil servant, provincial government civil servant, he so there is this office called registration of documents where any property sale deed has to be registered. It's a classically known corruption place.
Right.
Just let's say 50 yards from my office, but it's one of those many offices, and I was like the boss's boss. But it's just
Right.
50 yards among many things that go on. I mean, I never even went there. I
Yeah.
had heard they're very corrupt, but what do you do, right? Nobody's coming to me to talk about it. I have no evidence, whatever.
Right.
So what happens is that this guy comes and complains to me that these guys, I told them I was a civil servant, but they still charged me a certain percentage because they
Right.
just do it. It is just like literally a
Ru-
tax they impose, and it has been going on for far so long that they expect everybody to pay. It's not
Yeah.
even a
It's rule of
negotiation.
thumb. It has become
Hmm?
rule of thumb. They say
It's
this
kind
is
of
the way things. Yeah.
3% everybody has to
Yeah.
pay, right?
Yeah.
And they, that kind of, and then it happens a lot in the revenue department, those kind of things. There, regular transactions happen, money is involved, and and because, and there is also the cultural elements here. People who buy land are by culture supposed to be happy and
Yeah.
therefore feed everyone. Or they'll
Right.
buy mithai for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you bought land. Fayaz, this is the rural
Right.
culture, right?
Yes. Yes.
The one selling land, so the one
Yeah.
who buys land is supposed to make everyone happy, culturally speaking, right?
Yes.
And
Celebrate it and give some chai
celebrate. It's an
pani.
occasion of
Yeah.
celebration,
Yeah.
right? It's an
Yeah.
occasion of celebration. And so
Yeah.
this kind of tax is almost part of that process.
Yeah.
So this guy didn't want to pay. He comes, complains to me, and says that hey, these guys were charging me. And not only they charged me when I became when I when we I he said that he refused to pay. I he These guys got angry and they insulted him or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, and said, go, you can go whomsoever you want to complain to. We give an F. Just
Yeah.
do whatever you want to. So he came to me, and I was very upset because he's a fellow civil servant, and if these guys do this to him,
Right.
think about ordinary people. So I walked over with him to that office. Literally the first time I was there, I had been posted there for 2 or 3 months. I don't know,
Right.
1 month, something like that. I went there and I asked. Of course, there is no record of anything. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just the record. Official record is all regular payments and stuff.
Yeah.
I had a brain wave or whatever at that time. That started the whole idea. I said, okay, you guys, whenever you have these buy or sell, or these transaction happens, you write the names of these people, the transaction details, and write their mobile number,
Right.
and you send me that list in the afternoon.
Oh, okay. All
Okay,
right.
that was the whole idea.
Very
So
simple. Yeah.
So basically, the point was that I mean, I now I'm much more experienced about it. I've done it, many places. That time it was just one of those things, and that's
Yeah.
one of those action things, right? I mean, if I didn't need any permission to do this. I was the boss. I could say, okay, send me this document every evening. You have 20 transactions. Fayaz sold land to Zubair. This is Fayaz's cell number. This is Zubair's cell number, and this was a government tax, 5,000
Right.
rupees. You know, and then
Yeah.
the whole idea was that I will not wait for this person to come to me to complain. I will call this person.
Right. So did you call
Okay.
all of them, or it was on at random? You picked some
I
of them.
started I
Yeah.
started randomly calling people, right?
Okay.
And the following were the objectives of that call. First, I wanted to communicate to the ordinary person through that action and even my office that
Yeah.
I wasn't taking a commission of this ordinary corruption going around my office.
Right. Yeah.
Because you
It was
also
not
because
coming up
people
to you.
assume that
Yeah.
I'm
Part of it.
party to that,
Yeah.
right? Because it has
Yeah.
been going
Yeah.
on forever. And there
Right.
are people who are party to it, but I
Yeah.
wasn't. But people don't know. So I would
Yes.
communicate, and therefore, second objective was to show that the deputy commissioner, the boss of the district, is so interested in your welfare that I am calling you rather than you coming to my office.
Yeah. 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 Right.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
an important message
Exactly.
as a
Because
change.
yes, you reach out to
Okay,
them
you
instead
reach
of
out to
them
them,
coming
the
to you.
state is
Yeah.
coming to you. You
Right.
have been coming to the state for the last 5,000 years. No,
Right.
the state will come to you to serve you. I mean, this is a
Yes.
message, right? We didn't reform
Exactly.
much, we didn't
Yeah.
do IT. And this wasn't, I didn't invest anything. There was no money involved, there was no investment. It's just a process.
You reverse the relationship. You did
I
not
was trying to
accept
reverse
it.
that
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
I was trying to
Right.
reverse that relationship.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, these things are not easy. There's culture, there's history, there's a
Yes.
lot of things, but some people, and then I call, let's say, somebody, and this guy says, well, good, yeah, this happened, whatever, but I paid 7,000 rupees. And I said, well, in my transaction, I say the tax is 5,000. He said, oh, I don't know. I mean, somebody broker came to me and said, I'll charge 7,000. We will get everything done or whatever. So there are brokers involved, and there's a complicated
Yeah.
process,
Right. Right.
right? And those brokers take money, and and this happens in customs, this happens in income tax, this happens in everything,
Yeah. Go
uh,
betweens who are there
the
who facilitate
go-betweens
this
who
thing.
do
Yeah.
this. So it's complicated. Anyway, I found one situation where I could have some sense. Okay, let's this case. Why? Who took 2,000 extra rupees? I asked those guys. Started an anti-corruption proceeding or something against some clerk or something like that,
Okay.
based on this evidence of
Complaint.
money,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
money was obtained.
Right.
That obviously scared the hell out of this branch.
Revenue
So they
clerks. Yeah.
became, they became much more serious about this.
Right.
So I thought, I can do this with this branch. I can do this with 10 other different branches that doing similar kind of work. The domicile
Right.
branch, the domicile branch, the copying branch, you know, and I kind of started expanding into other services. Now, obviously, I just didn't have the time to, call 50 people. I didn't even have the time or
Right.
the energy to call five people or three people.
Right.
But at least if I call some, or at least was seen to be calling some, it will create some deterrence. So the idea
Yes.
was that, I mean, to multiply my deterrence, right?
Right.
Using this idea
Right.
across
Yeah.
sectors. And frankly, and the patwaris, I started asking for patwaris as well, the data of patwaris or whatever. and many files started coming every day. But of course, I at that time I didn't have much of an idea how to scale up. I didn't know IT. I didn't know a lot of those processes.
Right.
But anyway, at that time, and this is one story that I remember very clearly, and that's, I think, the heart of it. Is I called someone up. No, I went to some college for some other activity, and and some professor told me that some neighbor of his got a call from you, and and he came and told him, you don't believe, you don't know what happened. The deputy commissioner, called me up and asked,
Yeah.
and so, and I liked the idea. It was good feedback that people are talking
Yes.
about it. I mean, anybody who gets my call probably talks to five people and says,
Right.
you don't know
Yeah.
what happened. The deputy
Yeah.
commissioner called me, out of the blue. Okay. So I called this one guy and I said, well, you had this Patwari transaction or something. He says, well, everything was
It is
okay. There was no
changing the
money.
culture. Yeah. If you
Oh,
allow me, because Qudratullah Shahab has mentioned that it is so well entrenched that people will come with Dali tribute to the higher ups, even during the
yeah,
British
people
period.
assume so.
Yeah.
And it's in lots of other issues involved. Like I mean, we only
Yes.
have a few minutes left, and I would like to close
Yeah.
now. But this is the heart of it. So I called this one guy up and I said, uh, you know, tell me about it. And what I found was that people were reluctant to speak about it, not because they were scared, but people sometimes also pay money to speed things up. They don't want to spend a
Yeah.
line, they're like, okay, fine, whatever. So he
Yeah.
tells me, he says, oh, there was no problem. I didn't give any money to anyone. I said, I kind of got a little angry. I said, Chaudhry Saab, or whatever his name was. I said,
Yeah.
I am the deputy commissioner here. I am calling you. You are not calling me. I am calling
Right.
you,
Yeah.
hoping to serve you. And you are not telling me the truth because I know 100% that this service cannot happen without paying money.
Right. Yeah.
And he says, well, Zubair Saab, let me tell you something. This guy, Patwari, I had to pay him. But he made me promise on Quran that if I called, please don't tell him. Don't tell me. You know? And I said, okay. He said, but then the most interesting thing, he
Yeah.
told me, please keep on doing this because their rate has gone down.
Okay. Great. Yeah.
And
Yes.
before they would be insult us and take money, and now he's
Yeah.
like, please, please, please don't tell anyone, and he's charging less amount of money.
Okay.
For
So it
me,
makes a difference.
this was so this was the most interesting kind of experience. Gave me a lot of motivation. Okay, people
Right.
may not tell me the detail, but if I put my weight behind the citizen, the negotiating position of the citizen vis-a-vis the government servant increases. Corruption may not
Yes.
go away, but
Yeah.
the relationship, extremely unequal relationship,
Right. Yeah.
becomes slightly less unequal.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Okay. Anyway, long story short, from
Well,
there,
yeah.
I left because of other reasons. And then I worked with the Chief Minister of Punjab to kind of scale it up across the province because then you scale up using IT, using
Yeah.
SMS, robocalls,
Right.
and then the challenge is the other civil servants. It's like, I asked every civil servant, let's say DCOs, why don't you make
Yeah.
one call every day? And I
Exactly.
remember, nothing
Yeah.
much. How it's nothing, right? 2 minutes,
Yeah.
one call every
Exactly.
day.
Yeah.
And one guy says, "Oh sir, ਕੀ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ? ਹੁਣ ਅਸੀਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਗਾਲਾਂ
Yes.
ਕਰੀਏ."
That's the mindset. Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
because the whole culture is I'm the boss. People should come beg favors from me,
Yes.
not that I am here and I should try to improve things. I mean, I'm saying not everybody's like that, but the general culture.
There's the big psychological barrier. Yeah.
That's the
In
big
breaking
psychological
this.
barrier,
Yeah.
right? And people are not paid well, and therefore they extract player from and from kind of this psychological
Authority.
income is
Yeah.
being authority,
Yes.
chodrat or
Yes.
whatever we
Yes.
call it.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, we implemented it. when you implement at scale, there are limitations. There's a paper which came out in India, actually a randomized controlled trial, I'll send it to you, which
Oh,
actually
okay.
evaluated the whole idea in India, and it's published in the Journal of Economic Quarterly, top 5 journals, and it showed impact of this sort of an idea, right? The
Yes.
impact is preventive. And and the biggest challenge for me in explaining this point to everywhere I go and I talk about this, people say, oh, we have a complaint system. I say, well, complaint
Yeah.
systems have been there for 5,000 years. Forget about them.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, how are you using the infrastructure of mobile phones? And I'm not talking
Yeah.
smartphones, I'm talking ordinary mobile phones to
Yes.
reach out. And it's very the same as the private sector. You go to Hilton, Hilton sends you an email next day asking for feedback.
Yeah.
You buy something in Amazon, Amazon asks for feedback. They're not waiting
Yeah.
for complaints. They proactively ask you for feedback about the quality of service,
This is
right?
reversing the relationship. This is wonderful. That gives them so much courage, and
That's the, this the
yeah,
state is not a brutal state. The state is
exactly.
invested in your welfare. Communicating
Yeah.
that message is an extremely important message.
Yeah. It's very small investment, but it has huge impact.
Well, I like
That
to think
is the
so.
most important
I
thing.
like
Yeah.
to think so.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sparing time. This is a message I and Manur want to communicate to young people across the universities in Pakistan, North America, everywhere else. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.